Good evening, everyone. We begin tonight with the enduring, endlessly controversial, and ugly political debate over abortion. Now, from the olden days when I grew up in the 1980s, this is how abortion was experienced by women in much of the United States.
A woman accused of setting fires at 3 abortion clinics is under arrest tonight in New Jersey.
Real feminists don't kill babies!
Stand up. There were similar demonstrations in other parts of the country. In Albany and Syracuse, New York, 150 arrests. In Philadelphia, the demonstrators went limp and police carted them off on stretchers. 40 demonstrators in Dayton, Ohio were charged with trespassing, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest.
A nationwide reign of terror against abortion providers kicked off. Women forced to enter abortion clinics behind barricades and a police presence under a huddle of escorts. Guerrilla warfare tactics were particularly used against these clinics. And those that worked in them were also the targets of extreme violence, including arson, bombings, murders, and acid attacks. This was life in the 1980s in America, seeing anti-abortion terrorists bombing and torching clinics throughout the country. Here you're seeing the destruction of a clinic in Pensacola, Florida, using pipe bombs. It was one of 3 clinics bombed by 4 people early Christmas morning in 1984. This Pensacola multi-arson attack wasn't unique for the area. In fact, Pensacola, Florida, became a hotbed of anti-abortion hysteria in that decade. The hysteria only worsened and got more organized when conservative groups like Operation Rescue made going to an abortion clinic as a patient or working at one particularly dangerous. Here you see Operation Rescue protesters in Minneapolis, where 153 people were arrested and carted out of a building where they blocked a hallway leading to an abortion clinic inside. According to Slate, Operation Rescue would organize abortion clinic hits, as clinic defenders called them, in which hundreds of members would mob a single abortion clinic. Over the course of the 1980s, the U.S. lost nearly 20% of abortion providers. The Slate article reports the observations of longtime Women's Choice Clinic director Lindsay Comey, who said the attacks were spearheaded by, quote, very angry men. Comey added, quote, this was a fight about male superiority. And the worst of the right wing came out to join that struggle. Not only were they women haters, but they were queer haters. It was a Christian militia. The 1990s and 2000s weren't much better, with the first abortion doctor killed. Others would follow, including one doctor who was killed as he stood in the foyer of his church.
Dr. David Gunn was shot after getting out of his car as he came to work at a Pensacola abortion clinic. A dozen anti-abortion protesters from an Assembly of God church were outside. One of them was armed. When Dr. Gunn arrived,
a guy took after the doctor and shot him point blank in the back, and then he surrendered to the cops.
Dr. John Baird Britton and the men accompanying him, they were shot to death outside a Pensacola, Florida abortion clinic. The escort's wife was also wounded in the hail of shotgun blasts.
Dr. George Tiller was killed in his church.
It was a violent and cruel era. Women and abortion clinic workers basically lived through 3 decades of terrorism around abortion. But something else had also happened in the 1980s in France, where a new drug, mifepristone, commonly called RU-486, was developed to be taken for medication abortion care. The arrival of a drug that would allow women to skip the miserable and even terrifying process of facing down anti-abortion zealots at clinics was a game changer. The drug was approved for use in France in 1988, but American women had to wait much longer.
There is a pill made in France that induces abortion, but it is not sold in the United States and may never be.
The reason? Anti-abortion groups, which promise an economic war against any firm which even tries to bring in RU-486.
You are going to see literally millions of people across the United States rise in outrage over this. That company will be boycotted.
But RU-486 continued to be used in parts of Europe and China. And by the year 2000, American women finally got access to the drug. Today, more than 60% of abortions in the U.S. are done using mifepristone medication. Medication abortion literally saved women from harassment and from terrorism, and from needing police escorts to literally lift them over anti-abortion protesters blocking the entrances of clinics, like this woman in 1988. But the religious far right has not given up their fight to close off this and every other avenue to women's bodily autonomy. First step was overturning Roe v. Wade. Check. Samuel Alito took care of that. The vociferous opponent of reproductive freedom, whose slow-burning hostility to constitutional abortion rights burned bright after finally overturning Roe. So much so that he literally gloated and joked about unleashing women's suffering during his Look What I Did world tour. Next, a far-right judge in Texas took up the baton. That would be Judge James Ho of the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, who served on the 3-judge panel last summer that ruled to restrict access to mifepristone. And here's something interesting about interesting and Clarence Thomas-y, I should say, about him. Per The Guardian, his wife, Allison, is a powerhouse federal appellate lawyer who has argued in front of the Supreme Court and has deep connections to the conservative legal movement that has led to the attack on the right to abortion in the U.S. Judge Ho also once clerked for, drumroll, Clarence Thomas. I know, we live in the worst simulation ever. Which brings us back to the conservative majority Supreme Court, which held oral arguments today on whether to overturn the FDA's approval of mifepristone more than 20 years ago. Today's arguments came down to 3 questions. Question number 1, how in the world do these people have standing?
Rolling back FDA's changes would unnecessarily restrict access to mifepristone with no safety justification. Some women could be forced to undergo more invasive surgical abortions. Others might not be able to access the drug at all. And all of this would happen at the request of plaintiffs who have no certain injury of their own.
Number 2, how is this small group of doctors able to make a decision not just for their own patients, but for every woman in America?
They're saying because we object to having to be forced to participate in this procedure, we're seeking an order preventing anyone from having access to these drugs at all. And I guess I'm just trying to understand how they could possibly be entitled to that, given the injury that they have alleged.
There's a profound mismatch here between the claimed injury and the remedy they were seeking.
And number 3, should some doctors' individual religious objection to abortion be allowed to override decades of the FDA's scientific judgment over the safety of this medication?
Respondents don't identify any evidence that the agency overlooked. They just disagree with the agency's analysis of the data before it, but that doesn't provide a license to authorize judicial second-guessing of the agency's expert judgments.
Joining me now is my dear friend and colleague, Rachel Maddow, the host, as you know, of the Rachel Maddow Show. Rachel, it is always good to see you, and that was my take. You know, I'm an 80s baby, so or not an 80s baby, but you know, I was young in the 80s. And so I just remember the abortion debate as like terrorism, and now this being freedom for a lot of women. That was my take. What is yours on what we saw today?
Yeah, Joy, I think that was a really important and sobering setup. Actually, some of those images that you showed are images that I've never seen before. That image of that woman, the woman being lifted over the line of abortion protesters by police. I mean, I've never seen that image before. That was incredible. But I mean, there's the technical arguments here, and there's, you know, the FDA drug approval process, not just for this drug, but for every drug, which this ruling at the district court level in Texas and the Fifth Circuit would put at risk. It wouldn't just potentially, if they got their way, it wouldn't just potentially challenge the approval of mifepristone. It would challenge the approval of thousands of drugs. So there's the sort of technical side of this, but then there's, you know, what you point out, which is the real lived experience of American women who need abortion care, who need to get abortions. And having the option of getting a medication abortion, it's not appropriate for everybody and in every circumstance, but it is for a lot of abortions, actually now for a majority of abortions. And what they're trying to do is take it away, not just in the states where they've already banned abortion. They're trying to take it away nationwide. They want a nationwide ban. This means, you know, California, Illinois, New York, Massachusetts, everywhere. And the science and the reasoning in these lower court arguments that they're considering is so out there and so beyond the pale. It is a little bit frightening. It is a little bit sort of shaking me up a bit that the Supreme Court is even hearing this at all.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel any better, I have already put evac on alert. He's ready to go if it comes to that. General, I can assure you.
General, let me into the war room to see you, so I had to hack my way onto this frequency.
This better be critical, Wheelie.
Sir, come on, when is it not? Please. Okay, couple of things. I'm running low on the dough. I was thinking about taking a couple of months sick leave, maybe starting today. And, oh yeah, I intercepted a transmission from Megatron.
Then send it through.
Yes, sir, right away, sir. And so I'll assume that we're going on the other stuff.
This is your last warning, insects. Relinquish what remains of the Allspark.
So who's the insect? You? What? Who's the insect?
Protect you. They were defeated on our world, and we will defeat them here.
This was just a diversion. Security, please bring up. Ravage, he's already inside. Deeds! Give me an update on that reserve. Boss readiness. What was his name? What was it?
Evac, sir.
Right, evac.
She's right in front.
We are facing a heavy, sustained attack. They appear to be after the Allspark craft. General! General! National security advisor! Stand down! Check it out! There is this outrageous!